Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
The rich man entrusted his daughter to the farmer in the village to educate her. But when he returned for her after a year, he was shocked to see what had happened. Andrea watched the man running towards her with a furious expression and the overturned truck not so much calmly as with a hint of satisfaction. Look at him. Running, waving his arms, shouting something. Probably swearing, she thought. Well, she could understand him. She would curse too if, dodging a jeep hurtling straight at her, she somersaulted a couple of times along with the truck. Well, run, run. And what can you do to me? You big country bumpkin. Feeling the adrenaline dissipate after those terrifying moments when she realized she couldn't steer away in time and a collision was inevitable, Andrea chuckled and dialed a number. Her father would sort everything out, as usual. Slip the guy some bucks, and he'd settle down. How much damage was there, anyway? Not much. And if he caused trouble, Dad's security boys would scare him so much he'd wet his pants. Either way, Dad would handle it, no problem. Hello, came her father's voice. Just to be safe, Andrea locked the windows and doors. Feeling secure, she whined in a capricious tone, Daddy, I'm in trouble. How much this time? Replied her loving father in an annoyed tone. He knew his daughter well. Oh, nothing serious. Just had a little run-in with some guy on the road. His wagon flipped. Seems there were some animals involved. Sheep, maybe goats. They're dead anyway. Andrea pouted. Daddy, hurry. He's already at the car, and I'm scared. Send someone to sort it out. I'll send you the location. While the man raged outside her tinted windows, she made sure the car was securely locked from the inside, turned on some music, and inspected herself in the mirror. Her pretty face seemed unharmed. That would have been inconvenient, a lot had been invested in it. But her elbow hurt, she did hit it when she jerked the wheel. And where did that goat of a man come from on the road? Driving that thing beyond the village and getting out is just shameful. He should have stayed in his dung heap, but no, he decided to transport his stinking sheep somewhere. So, it wasn't her fault. She was just driving fast, had a little drink. So what? There were never any cops on this road anyway. And if there were, who in their right mind would mess with her? Still, she felt uneasy. It was creepy to sit here and watch the man try to break into her car. Relief only came when, after about 40 minutes, Andrea saw a familiar car in the rearview mirror. Her father's guards commanded respect and even fear. They would sort this out. The car stopped, both guards got out. Then came the man she least expected to see here, though she had called specifically for him. Wait, did my father come himself? Doesn't he have anything better to do at home? Just in case, Andrea hesitated, not opening the door. Something strange was happening outside. Nobody was going to beat the man up. On the contrary, the security detail stood aside, and her father was peacefully talking to the country bumpkin. When they hugged and shook hands, Andrea's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What on earth is happening there? Finally, her father approached and tapped the window with his fingertips. Open up. Andrea heard. For some reason, she didn't like the tone in which it was said. When her father spoke like that, even she listened. The girl opened the door and cautiously set her fashionable shoe on the ground. She always drove in couture shoes, always in heels, considering it her personal style. Stepping out of the car, Andrea looked around. Her father looked grim and displeased. Standing next to him was the man who turned out to be younger than she had thought. The beard had thrown her off. Now she realized they were almost the same age. Maybe he was slightly older. In any case, he looked terrible in those rags, and she wasn't interested in him. Just in case, Andrea moved closer to her father and stood behind him. The guards kept their distance and did not interfere. Dad, I'm not guilty. Andrea decided that the best defense was a good offense. And it's all his fault. He could have cleared the road faster. Shut up, Her father cut her off so sharply that she closed her mouth and indignantly fluttered her long, mascaraed lashes. Today wasn't going according to plan, and it was stressing her out. She had never seen her forgiving father this angry. "Andrea, you've crossed all boundaries," her father scolded her. "I've tolerated your antics for too long. You don't understand simple words. You're becoming a danger to others and yourself. Antonio said you were speeding." "Yeah, right." For his car, any normal speed would seem like speeding. Andrea yelled, gearing up for her second option, a tantrum. "Who do you believe?" "I believe my own eyes and the son of my army buddy," her father said, enunciating each word clearly. "What?" Andrea was thrown off and glanced at the man in work clothes. He gave her a stern look tinged with disdain. "Dad, I don't understand." "Yes, maybe I went a little over the speed limit. Can you imagine how scared I was?" Trying to elicit sympathy didn't work either, although Andrea tried to squeeze out a tear from her eyes. Just a little, or her mascara would run. Her father's eyes remained cold, and Andrea shivered. "Andrea, I've tolerated your behavior for too long," her father said slowly. "Perhaps too long. You've turned into a monstrous egoist, and that's my mistake. And mistakes need to be corrected." He turned to the surly farmer. "Antonio, how much do you estimate the damage caused to you?" Andrea inwardly sighed with relief. Since money was now being discussed, everything would proceed as usual. The farmer would take the money, they would leave home, and forget about this misunderstanding. She just needed to endure, wait it out until Daddy stopped fussing. "About 300,000, came the muffled reply from the man her father oddly referred to by name. "Those were my best sheep, intended for sale." "Consider them sold," her father said, looking not at the farmer, but directly at Andrea. "My daughter will work it off." "What?" Andrea thought she must have misheard. "Dad, are you joking?" "Does it look like I'm joking?" her father inquired. His expression was such that no one could suspect him of being in a jocular mood. "And how exactly am I supposed to work it off?" Andrea straightened up, glaring angrily at her father. "With my body? Is that your proposal, father?" The farmer grimaced, and her father's bodyguards behind him smiled. Apparently, they found such payment agreeable. "Yes, who needs you?" the farmer muttered, spitting on the ground. It was insulting. No one dared to behave like this towards Andrea. "Daughter, you finally disappointed me," her father grimaced. "If this is how you're used to solving problems, then I wash my hands of it. Antonio," he addressed the farmer again, "I've decided. My daughter will stay on your farm as a laborer until she works off the entire amount." "Her? A laborer? She can't do anything." "A white-collar worker, obviously." It seemed the farmer, like Andrea, hoped that the oligarch was joking. "Then teach her," her father stated firmly. "But remember, if you so much as lay a finger on her, you'll answer to me." "Lay a finger on her? Not in a million years." Antonio gave Andrea a disgusted look. "Bernardo, get her out of here. I've lost my sheep and now I have to fix my van. What more punishment do I need?" "You, shut up." Andrea couldn't help herself and tugged at her father's shirt sleeve. "Dad, come on, let's end this circus, shall we?" "Yes, I'm guilty, I'll make amends. Just give him the money and let's go home." "Make amends?" Her father's eyes were unkind. "Fine, make amends. Claudio, get in the car, drive the Jeep into the garage." One of the guards, pushing Andrea aside, got into the driver's seat of her car. Her heart pounded in her chest. The situation was swiftly slipping out of her control. Her father seemed serious. Antonio seemed to have decided the same, as he began to protest vehemently. However, his protests were cut off with a wave of her father's hand. "Antonio, I'm asking you sincerely." The gray-haired man no longer resembled a powerful master of life. He was just a tired, world-weary man. "Let my daughter live here, learn how to earn money. I understand that I am to blame. After her mother's death, I spoiled the girl, indulged her in everything. And here's where it all ends. Today the sheep died, he shrugged. Tomorrow it could be people. Andrea needs a good lesson. Your father would have supported me. Antonio paused, glanced at Andrea, who stared at them wide-eyed, then at her father. He nodded silently, without saying a word. All right, out of respect for you, Uncle Bernardo, he said. But if she causes trouble here, what then? Here's my card. Her father handed him a glossy rectangle. All the necessary contacts are there. But if you call, it'll mean my defeat. And I don't like losing. Do you understand me, daughter? Andrea shivered, never having seen her father like this before. If you try to escape, you can forget about my financial support in the future, he continued. I'll freeze all your accounts, you'll be on your own. Is that clear? I see you understand. Well then, we'll see each other when you've worked off what's due. Her father turned away and walked towards the car. Both vehicles turned and sped off towards the city. Andrea was left in the Jeep with her purse containing documents, her mobile phone, and credit cards. At that moment, she realized that she was truly in trouble. Andrea watched them go, still not believing that this was really happening. Two emotions battled in her soul, amazement and anger. How could her father do this to her? Surely he would change his mind and return, and then she would retaliate. It wouldn't be enough to show no mercy to anyone. Meanwhile, she could vent her anger on the man who caused it all. Turning to the grim Antonio, Andrea exclaimed, "You village idiot! Dung beetle!" She advanced towards him with clenched fists, but abruptly winced and fell silent. Antonio's hand covered her mouth. Listen to me, you half-baked rich girl, the farmer slowly spoke, examining her as if she were an ugly insect. I hate people like you. You're human trash, worse than beggars. At least they have some conscience, but you're sure that everything is allowed because you were born to wealthy parents. What are you looking at? Go on, catch up, cry, Daddy will forgive you. But I think he was serious. Oh, really? Andrea turned on her heels, determined to chase after the cars along the highway. Crack, something snapped, and she nearly fell. Then, with a string of curses, she bent down, examining her damaged shoes. The heel had been irreparably broken. God sees all, Antonio observed. Walk barefoot, that's what you deserve. He turned away from the stunned girl and headed towards the van. Andrea heard him cursing inside, invoking all kinds of curses upon her head. She wasn't interested in the farmer's problems, but she was very interested in her own. Walking barefoot was definitely not an option. After a moment's thought, she made a decision. Hey, you! She called out to the farmer. He didn't even turn his head, engrossed in his work. I need shoes and then I'll leave. Or call me a taxi yourself. Antonio heard her and turned around, a very unpleasant smirk on his face. You'll manage without. Perhaps I do need a worker after all. So, let's move to the farm, you'll get a pair of boots there too. You'll work off their cost as well. Sound good? Oh, screw you. Andrea retorted. Well, wait. You'll see what I can do to you. But for now, I need to rest and come up with a new plan, she decided. You'll drive me back to my father yourself. Deep down, she still hoped that her father would quickly calm down and forgive his troublesome daughter, as he always had. Let's go together. I'll go get the tractor, you change clothes, Antonio declared. We need to fix the van, process the sheep for meat, he said, looking sadly at the sheep carcasses whitening near the van. And what did I do to anger God so much that he sent you to me? He muttered under his breath. Andrea fell silent, deciding there would be time to settle the score later. What had happened to her was so bewildering that she chose to wait it out. Who knew what might happen? Perhaps her father would change his mind and come back for her, and then he would also see the severity of the situation. The stress she had endured could be soothed by a trip to some exotic country. And afterward, she could remind everyone how much she had suffered. This guy, apparently the son of his friend? That meant he would refrain from pushing too hard out of respect for their military friendship. Her father definitely had a thing about that. It was long overdue to forget that he had almost died somewhere where a normal person wouldn't dare to go. And he takes pride in that. Complete absurdity. Andrea coughed, reminding herself that she was walking in shoes with a broken heel and wasn't keeping up. However, the farmer either didn't hear her or pretended not to. "Hey you!" Andrea called out. "I can't keep up." The man didn't even slow down. Andrea hissed in indignation. But when she fell so far behind that the farmer had already disappeared into the bushes, she spat on everything, took off her shoes, and trotted after him in her stockings. Her feet immediately started stinging from the pebbles and grass. "Help, can't you see?" Andrea made a second attempt to appeal to the conscience of the brazen man. This time he heard her, turned around, and assessed the extent of the disaster. "See what's next?" he asked the bewildered girl standing in the middle of the field. "I can't walk." She was very angry, but asserting her rights was not in her interest right now. "Well, stay here then," the farmer shrugged. "I'm not carrying you." "Oh, you would dare!" shouted Andrea. The farmer squinted, looked her up and down, approached closer, and asked, "Listen, girlfriend, are you really not getting the situation? Are you lacking brains, or what?" Andrea was stunned. She had never been spoken to like this in her life. Everyone feared her father, who could dismiss anyone with a snap of his fingers if they dared to contradict his daughter. But now there was no one to dismiss. This guy didn't obey her father. Moreover, he had the audacity to call her, Andrea Torres, the daughter of an oligarch, one of the most enviable brides in the country, simply stupid. "If only I could make a call." She started menacingly and faltered. She didn't have a phone, and this jerk was unlikely to lend her his so she could complain about him. Taxis didn't drive through fields. Moreover, she had no idea where she had ended up. "Are you getting it?" smirked the nasty guy. "Your options are limited. Stay here and hope for a wizard to appear or come with me. What do you choose?" Andrea shuddered. Spending the night in an open field was not appealing to her, so she had to go along with him. After thinking for a moment, she muttered through her teeth, "I'll go with you. But I can't walk. Can't you see that?" The farmer mockingly shrugged. "I don't see it. You still have legs, right? So what's the problem?" Andrea nearly jabbed him in the face with her broken shoe. He glanced at her, chuckled, picked up the other shoe, and decisively snapped off its heel. "Here, no need to thank me," he declared triumphantly. Andrea hadn't even considered thanking him. On the contrary, she hoped she could come up with something to fix her favorite shoes. Now they were just pitiful ballet flats with no hint of their former heels. Mentally, she wished the farmer would disappear, snatched her shoe back from him, put it on, and realized she could finally walk. True, she wasn't used to walking without heels, the soles felt unfamiliar. But it beat tearing her Italian stockings on small stones. The farmer, deciding not to wait for any gratitude, continued on his way. Andrea trudged along behind him. The alcohol haze had cleared from her mind, and now self-pity battled with anger. This just can't be happening. What happened to the gentle father who eagerly indulged his daughter's every whim? How could he abandon his only daughter to fate like this? And to someone unknown? So what if he's a friend's son? That doesn't make him the friend himself. Who knows who he really is? Maybe he's a maniac? A normal person wouldn't be stuck in a village up to his ears in mud and manure, raising livestock for sale. She thought he didn't resemble the cowboys she'd seen in movies. He dressed poorly. "Yes, Andrea, it seems you've really gotten yourself into a mess." The farmer strode ahead without looking back, forcing her to quicken her pace. Soon the field ended, and some structures surrounded by a low fence came into view. Vegetable beds were visible, something green was growing there, and the sounds of lowing and bleating could be heard. Apparently, there was still some livestock left with the unfortunate man. Great, he's not selling off the last of them. Andrea fumed. My father's really something. He'd have given money, scolded, and that would have been the end of it. How could he? Meanwhile, the farmer passed through the gate, turned around, and waited as Andrea approached with an independent air. Silently, he surveyed her attire, spat, and walked into the house, leaving her standing at the gate. While Andrea looked around, unsure of what to do next, he returned and tossed a bundle at her feet, from which old worn-out sneakers spilled out. Change into these, he commanded. While I go get the van, clean yourself up a bit. You'll help process the lost sheep. Without waiting for a response, he started up the tractor and drove off. Andrea kicked at the hopelessly ruined shoe with her toe, bent down, picked up the oversized shirt with 2 fingers, wrinkled her nose in disgust. Her fears were unfounded. The clothes, though worn, were clean. The sneakers looked comfortable enough too. After some hesitation, Andrea changed her shoes, not wanting to touch the rest of the clothing. As if, while the jerk wasn't around, she could look around and have a snack. Yes, she just realized she was starving from nerves. Andrea headed straight for the house, climbed the porch, opened the door, and looked around. Not bad for a country place. Her well-off acquaintances paid big money to live in such a country-styled house. All wooden furniture, and the appliances all looked new everywhere. Raising sheep seemed like a profitable business. Andrea pulled open the fridge door, inspected the provisions with a keen eye, and put together a couple of ham sandwiches, adding tomatoes, greens, and cheese. She poured herself some milk and searched for alcohol, wouldn't hurt to take the edge off. However, there was nothing stronger than milk in the fridge. She sighed ruefully and started on her meal. When she finished her snack, Andrea decided she was tired and collapsed onto the bed in her sneakers. Apparently, she dozed off because the farmer had returned. So, that's how it is, huh? He asked, studying the girl sprawled on his bed and the remnants of her feast on the table. Didn't think to ask for permission? You'll manage. Andrea yawned directly in his face and stretched. In the next moment, as if some force had pulled her off the bed and pressed her against the wall. The farmer's face was very close to hers, and Andrea shivered. She had never been looked at with such hatred before, and she had made quite a few mistakes in her short life. I'll say it once and only once, I won't repeat myself, the farmer said quietly, and for some reason, it was very scary. Uncle Bernardo said he doesn't like losing, and I'm sure he'll do exactly what he said, take your money away. Your behavior has pushed him to the limit. So if you think I'll call and ask you to come back, you're mistaken, I won't do that. Thinking of leaving? The woods are all around here, wolves and bears happen. The road's mostly for trucks. If you're not worried about that, get lost, maybe someone will pick you up. You owe me, and you owe me a lot. By the way, today's breakfast adds to your debt, he nodded at the table. From now on, the fridge is locked, you'll have to earn your food. And of course, you won't be sleeping in this bed, got it? Andrea glared at him silently. Not hearing an answer, the farmer barked. Understood? Yeah, get lost. Andrea replied, and in the next moment she shut her eyes. It seemed to her that the man wanted to hit her, but his lifted palm slapped against the wall nearby. Andrea looked fearfully at the wet spot on the tree, where some insect remained. I repeat the question, understood? The farmer inquired, and only now did she realize that these are no jokes, everything is true, everything happens for real. Dad, indeed, left her to work off this man, and he, too, does not laugh, and intends to make up for the damages. Understood, she snapped. Are you aware that this is called kidnapping? The farmer looked her up and down and burst out laughing. So you've picked up all this nonsense from movies, huh? I'd have guessed books, but people like you don't read. I have a degree in philology. Andrea gasped in indignation. Paid for by Daddy's money, the farmer clarified, and Andrea fell silent. She could have lied, claimed she was an exemplary student, but he had guessed correctly. Throughout her years of study, Andrea had barely attended classes 10 times. She lied to her father, claiming teachers were picking on her, extorting money, and he always solved the problems. Andrea spent her time in more enjoyable activities, like parties. Most students on her faculty were the same. Ready-made essays on any topic could be bought from those who came to study, not just enjoy themselves. So, they studied for them too. Well, the farmer said vaguely but hurtfully. I'm sure it will really help you when you're cleaning up after the livestock. Planning to recite Pushkin and Brodsky to them in these rags, he added, surveying her ripped jeans and tight couture top. None of your business. Andrea retorted. All right, what do I care, sighed the farmer and ordered, let's go, I'll show you where you'll be staying since getting rid of you didn't work out. He led Andrea to a large barn. Its lower part was adapted for farm needs, with stairs leading upstairs. Following the grim man, Andrea climbed up and saw a small living space. Very basic, a cot, a stool, a little table. Here's your humble abode, he announced. Make yourself at home, but don't forget, you're not a guest. Andrea looked around with disdain. Make myself at home? Is he crazy? This place would suit some homeless person. Well, sorry, it's not a hotel, the farmer grumbled. And you're not a guest here, you're hired help, don't forget. Andrea shot him an angry look and hissed, I'll get even, just wait and see. I have no doubt you'll try, the farmer retorted. But for now, you owe me 300 grand, plus breakfast and clothing. You can start working it off right now, and it'll stretch out for a year, wages aren't high in the countryside. Andrea remained silent, vowing to herself that she would do everything in her power to make this jerk's life unbearable. And what am I supposed to do? She asked haughtily. I told you, process the livestock, the farmer repeated, then couldn't help adding, I hope my sheep haunt your dreams. You won't live to see that, I sleep like a log. Andrea said gleefully, stepping after him onto the ground. She soon found out she was wrong. When the farmer, sighing heavily, started skinning the first sheep, she threw up right there on the ground. The sandwiches she had eaten rushed out of her stomach. She knew how pathetic she looked, but there was nothing she could do, doubled over from another wave. After watching her for a couple of minutes, the farmer scooped water from a bucket and handed it to her. Andrea drank, teeth chattering against the cold metal rim. Don't like it? The farmer asked. They wanted to live too. Get lost. Andrea moaned, greedily swallowing the water. Where would I go? The farmer shrugged. I'm at home here. Just no one's putting money in my account. You've killed my sheep, now at least preserve the meat and skins. You'll help pack the meat and take it to the freezer. Andrea tried not to watch as he angrily swung the axe, chopping the carcasses into pieces. She turned away, trying not to breathe deeply, picking them up, wrapping them in plastic, loading them onto a cart, and taking them to a huge refrigeration unit. Despite her best efforts, her clothes were soon splattered with blood, and she felt extremely awkward. When the last carcass was processed, the farmer wiped sweat from his brow and squatted down. Andrea's back ached from the unfamiliar labor, and she was glad for the break. Then, in the ensuing silence, a sound like a small child crying echoed from the pen. Andrea jumped, looking around, and immediately realized the noise was coming from the sheep enclosure. Why are you shaking your head? The farmer asked in a low voice. Those are the lambs crying. Think sheep are stupid, insensitive creatures? They sense death, those were their mothers. I couldn't care less, Andrea declared, glaring at him. Well, if you don't care, you don't care, the farmer turned away and spat on the grass. Go wash up, you look like some kind of maniac. Andrea strode over to where she had left her clothes. She spotted a tub filled with warm rainwater, ostentatiously stripped down to her underwear, and fervently began pouring water over herself from a bucket. She felt as though sheep's blood had seeped into her skin and hair, believing she could never wash it off. Wiping herself with what had become a ragged blouse, she pulled on her pants and shirt. Glancing at the farmer, who still hadn't looked her way, sitting on the ground as before. Uncertain of what to do next, she glanced around and saw a car approaching the farm. Dad changed his mind and sent people for me, was her first thought. However, as the car drew closer, she realized her mistake. 3 men of Eastern appearance got out, very smiling and very dangerous. Andrea, for some reason, decided that. "Antonio, where are you?" "Why aren't you greeting the guests?" called the tallest man. Judging by how tense the farmer became, Andrea concluded that these arrivals were far from friendly. "I was busy," the farmer replied shortly, gesturing to Andrea to leave. The girl defiantly stayed put. "My sheep died, had to put them down for meat," the farmer explained. "Unpleasant, I agree," nodded the tall man with feigned sympathy. "We were just passing by, decided to drop in and find out when you'll pay off the debt." "I don't owe you anything," the farmer gritted through his teeth, gripping an axe in his hand. The bandits drew their weapons and stood tensely, ready to act. "You don't owe, your father did, rest in peace," nodded the tall man. "According to our laws, the son is responsible for the father. My father settled with you long ago, and you know it." Antonio showed no fear, every muscle in his body tensed. "Interest has been accumulating." "He didn't manage to pay, he died," the tall man feigned sympathy. "And the interest keeps growing. You need to settle, Antonio." "Not good. You inherited the estate after your father, but who gave him the money to set everything up here?" "I did." "Pay up, Antonio." "If I pay once, you'll demand more the next time," the farmer retorted. The uninvited guests exchanged glances and laughed throatily. "Got it, Antonio," the leader spread his hands. "Sorry, it's just business. There are shepherds, and there are sheep. I'm a shepherd, Antonio, and you're the sheep." "You're the sheep yourself." Andrea unexpectedly spoke up, against her own will. It was just unpleasant to see this thug acting like a racketeer. A single word from her father, and he would tuck his tail and go back to his village. The dark-haired man noticed the girl, examined her assessingly, as if she were indeed a sheep or a cow put up for sale. "Antonio, why don't you teach your woman some manners?" he asked with deceptive softness. "She's not my woman, she works for me," the farmer casually replied. "She's foolish, pay her no mind." "Yes, I noticed she's foolish," nodded the tall man. "Well, here's my offer, give me the girl, and I'll cancel your debt." Andrea flinched, the guest wasn't joking. And what if the farmer decided it was a good deal? "I don't trade people," the farmer replied, gesturing with his eyes for Andrea to hide in the barn. She straightened up defiantly in response, "No way." "Do you want meat instead?" the farmer offered. "I'll take the meat," the bandit nodded, "but your words were offensive, you must be punished." "Risk your health." Andrea shouted. "Do you know who my father is?" "Shut up," the farmer snapped at her. "You're only making things worse." The guests aimed their weapons at the farmer. He lunged, rolled away, avoiding their sights, then grabbed Andrea's hand and dragged her into the barn. "Get upstairs," he ordered, pushing her towards the ladder and rushing inside. This time, she didn't argue and flew up like a bird, barricading the door with a small table. It was feeble protection, but better than nothing. Her heart raced like a caught bird's. "What in the world is happening?" she muttered in fear. Andrea froze, listening. Below, she heard automatic gunfire, cursing, and shouting. Then she heard the sound of the departing car and dared to peek out the window. The black car was speeding away from the farm. Andrea moved the table and began to descend. She found the farmer downstairs, holding a military rifle in his hands. She didn't know much about weapons, but they often showed them in action movies. The man looked very grim but seemed unharmed. "Who provoked you?" he asked wearily. "Christian and I had some sort of uneasy truce, now it'll be war." "Why stand and listen to him insult you like that?" Andrea retorted. "Well, sorry." I thought you had some pride. The farmer looked at her in a way that made her shiver. I'll call your father, let him take you away from here. It won't be safe soon. He waved his hand and headed towards the house. Perfect. Andrea thought triumphantly. So, I did everything right. Got what I wanted and put that arrogant guy in his place. Well done, Andrea. Dad won't dare criticize me when his daughter is in danger. They'll be coming for you soon, the farmer informed, squinting into the distance. Tell me, do you have a talent for bringing trouble from childhood, or is it just now that your gift has landed on my head? Andrea pursed her lips and turned away. Say whatever you want. I won't listen for long, she thought. Meanwhile, the detested farmer continued making calls to someone. She was completely uninterested, so she demonstratively climbed upstairs to the room above the barn and settled somewhat comfortably on the cot. She felt uneasy for some reason. Deep down, she understood that not only had she caused harm to this rustic guy, but she had also brought serious trouble upon his head. But should I have stayed silent while those mountain folk acted like kings around here, she argued with herself. I put him in his place and did the right thing. Let him lead in his own village. An hour passed. She grew bored and decided to peek outside. Perhaps they had already arrived for her? During her absence, the scene had indeed changed. It seemed like the farmer was preparing for war. He had gathered all sorts of junk, constructing something resembling a fortified position. Andrea had never seen such things, but the word pillbox popped into her mind. Perhaps it was because behind the barricade stood a real machine gun. Furthermore, he had locked up all the livestock in the barn, secured with bolts and piled with crates and hay. The farmer didn't even glance at Andrea, continuing to watch the field with the same expectant gaze. Soon, dust clouds appeared in the field, and he visibly tensed. Hold your fire. It must be for me, Andrea exclaimed nervously. A vehicle stopped at the gate. Indeed, it was Diego, the father's guard. He surveyed the preparations, clicked his tongue, and shouted, Hey, don't shoot, they're ours. Andrea, get in the car. Andrea triumphantly looked at the glum farmer, restraining herself from sticking out her tongue. She settled comfortably in the back seat, stretched out her legs in worn-out sneakers, and closed her eyes in satisfaction. The adventure was over, and now everything would go back to normal. Dad would grumble and calm down. He couldn't stay mad at his only daughter. As for that farmer, well, he got what he deserved, making her hold bloody pieces of meat in her hands. Andrea shuddered with disgust. At that moment, she caught the guard's gaze in the mirror. Something made her tense, but she waved it off. She was jittery, imagining things. Bye, she waved to the farmer, and the car sped away from that unpleasant place. However, when two SUVs passed by them, packed with people in camouflage, a pang of conscience stirred in Andrea's chest. Not my business, let them sort it out, she thought and started staring out the window. The driver remained silent, occasionally glancing at her in the mirror. Eventually, it began to irritate her, and she sharply asked, What's going on? Diego turned away and focused on the road. Trees flashed by, the highway ribboning smoothly under the wheels. Andrea grew bored of this monotonous landscape. Moreover, she realized she urgently needed some fresh air. Diego, stop near those bushes, she demanded. Surprisingly, the guard pretended not to hear. Are you deaf? She raised her voice. Stop, I said. A very unfriendly look flickered in the mirror, but the car stopped. Andrea moved towards the bushes, while the guard stayed near the vehicle. She crouched down, and then the wind carried fragments of a conversation to her. Yes, soon. Did she realize what I can do? Tell Christian I'm bringing the girl, she won't escape, she heard. What's happening? Thoughts raced in her head. Adjusting her clothes, she cautiously approached, stepping so quietly that not a single branch crackled. Yes, and I want the full amount up front. Do you even realize the risk I'm taking? Bernardo would have my head for his beloved daughter. Diego continued, and inside Andrea, everything turned cold. He's taking me to that man, a suspicion flashed. How and when did they manage to make a deal? However, that wasn't the most important thing right now. She had to run. But where? Thoughts fluttered in her head like scared birds. Andrea couldn't concentrate. She'd never felt so helpless. Even when her mom died and she was very scared, her father picked her up, held her close, and promised she wouldn't have to worry about anything. He'd take care of everything. Her dad kept his word. Andrea never experienced refusal in anything. And now, even her all-powerful father can't help her. Andrea nervously looked around. Run? He'll catch up. Hide? Well, where can you hide here? Just trees all around. She took a few steps. Suddenly, her foot slipped, and Andrea went down, clutching grass and barely holding back a scream. Branches and clods of earth rained down on her. In an instant, it turned dark, as if she'd gone blind or night had fallen. Once the initial shock subsided, she cautiously felt in front of her with her hands and found a dense, rough bark. It seemed she was lucky. The thick branch prevented a collapse of earth burying her alive, and leaves and grass concealed her from prying eyes. When the first fear passed, she noticed that in some places, light was filtering through the canopy. Just don't scream, Andrea urged herself. I'm alive, just fell into some pit. She needed to stay hidden and wait it out, then find a way back to the farm. Antonio, of course, was quite a character, but he wouldn't betray her. Up there, something rustled, and she froze, ready to claw at the traitor with her nails and fight like a wild cat if he tried to pull her out and take her to that black man. Her heart pounded so loudly she began to fear her pursuer could hear it. Minutes passed, but to her it felt like hours. All was quiet, and she started to feel cold. Andrea considered crawling back up when she heard Diego's voice directly above her. The girl's nowhere. Escaped, damn it. Where was I looking? She just slipped into the bushes for a moment. Who knew? She couldn't have gone far. Get the people, comb the woods, we'll catch her. Nowhere for her to hide. Not my fault. How no people? Heading back to the farm to sort this out? Well, then on the way back. Why are they taking so long with one guy? I get it, not my business. Waiting. Silence fell. Andrea realized her situation was dire. It was foolish to hope that this snake would just leave. He mentioned sorting things out, meaning there was practically a war going on at the farm right now. A sharp pang stabbed at her heart. Andrea stubbornly clenched her lips. Yes, it seemed Antonio was suffering again because of her. This time, much worse. Well, it's his own fault. Should have taken the money and gone our separate ways. However, memories kept flooding back one after another. How the farmer protected her, risking himself. How he called her father, knowing the all-powerful oligarch would not be pleased. A newfound feeling of shame and regret made her heart ache. If only she could turn back time. She wouldn't have even touched the steering wheel. At the same time, worry engulfed her. Does it mean they're killing Antonio right now on the farm? This thought gave her strength. Do you think she'll sit here in this pit and wait to be dragged out and taken to some Christian? Not a chance. She's Torres. Andrea had no idea what she would do. It seemed those above had decided for her, as she heard a shout, cursing, and then Diego fell right on top of her. He had indeed found the fugitive, but he didn't seem particularly pleased about it. Now he lay at the bottom of the pit, impaled by sharp stakes from his shoulder and leg. With more light filtering in, she could make out several more similarly sharpened stakes around him and shivered. It appeared the pit was a trap for large game. She was lucky. Perhaps her mother prayed for her wayward daughter on the other side, but she fell just aside from the deadly aim. Diego was much broader and landed almost in the center. It seemed he had also hit his head because the cries had stopped. He didn't show any signs of life. Without a second thought, Andrea crawled towards her fallen adversary and quickly searched his pockets. She grabbed the mobile phone anxiously, hoping it wasn't drained, adding to all her troubles. The guard's jacket was open, a holster hung from his belt. Andrea, without hesitation, pulled out the gun, slipped it into her pocket, and began to climb back up. Her heart thudded loudly, branches snapped, but she managed to escape from the pit that almost became her grave. Once on the surface, she dashed towards the car. Luck was on her side again, the keys were in place. The car started effortlessly, Andrea pressed the gas and sped down the highway. To the city, faster. Her father would fix everything. What about Antonio? Her conscience reminded her. Cursing, Andrea found the line boss in the phone and dialed. Yes, Diego. What's up with you? Came the displeased but familiar voice. Dad, it's not Diego. It's me, Andrea. Diego's a traitor, he tried to sell me to some Christian. Andrea shouted. Andrea, you, her father exclaimed in surprise. What are you talking about? Making up stories again? Where are you now? Dad, I'm not making this up. I'm driving in Diego's car, he fell into a pit. Andrea hoped her father would believe her and not dismiss this as another trick of his headstrong daughter. Okay, get a grip, don't panic. Focus on the road, her father's voice took on commanding tones, which helped her concentrate. Antonio's no pushover. I'm sure he can hold out until help arrives. You drive to the nearest gas station and wait. I'll send someone for you. And if the one you send is also a traitor? Andrea cried out in desperation. I'll come myself. Just do as I say. It sounded like an order. Andrea raced down the highway, praying that help would arrive in time. When she pulled up at the gas station, the roar of a helicopter filled the air. It was flying towards the farm. Dear God, hurry up. For some reason, she was certain this help was sent by her father. She sat at a small cafe in the gas station and froze, staring blankly. Someone placed a glass of water in front of her. Andrea gulped it down in 2 swallows and looked up. Thank you. Listen, dear, you look like you've been through something. The woman looked at her with pity. What happened? It's a long story. Andrea reached into her pocket and realized she had no money. I'm sorry, I can't pay. No need for anything. The woman studied her closely, noting her dirty face, the grime under her nails, and the scratches. It's clear you've been through something. Go wash up in the restroom. Okay, Andrea stood up on shaky legs and went to tidy herself up. Looking into the mirror, she was horrified. What a fright she looked. Scooping up handfuls of water, she splashed it on her face, rubbing it vigorously. It eased the tension a bit. Where is she? Where's the girl who came in that car? She suddenly heard. Her legs turned to jelly. I didn't see anyone, the woman insisted. Andrea peeked out from the restroom. Through the crack, she could see 2 rough-looking men approaching the woman who had shown her kindness. Anger surged within Andrea. Did she crawl out of that pit just to fall into the hands of these thugs? Would she surrender herself to them too? Absolutely not. No one else would suffer because of her. Hey, you. I'm right here. Back off from her, now. Andrea stepped forward. The thug stared at her, momentarily taken aback. Seizing the moment, the woman darted behind the counter. Well, look who decided to show up, chuckled the younger thug. Ew, she's filthy. Why would Christian want such a witch? The second thug gave Andrea a disdainful once-over. All right, let's go to the car. Enough messing around, he commanded. Stop. Andrea drew her gun. The thugs froze, eyeing the young woman now poised to shoot. Are you crazy? The younger one asked. You're only making it worse for yourself. Drop the gun, now, ordered the second thug. Christian said bring her back alive, but he didn't say she had to be conscious. 2 events happened simultaneously. A gunshot rang out, something shattered, and shards flew. One of the thugs slumped to the ground while the other collapsed beside him, hit by a wine bottle to the back of his head. The woman behind the counter watched in surprise at her own handiwork. "Well done, ladies." Bernardo Torres himself appeared in the doorway, holding a pistol. "Tie them up," he ordered his approaching guards. Behind them, the gas station workers gathered, drawn by the commotion. "I'll cover the damages," he assured the waitress. "With bonuses," he added. "As for you, enough adventures for today. Let's go home," he said to Andrea. Only then did she realize her father had fired the shot that felled the groaning thug. She had only hit the bottle. "Dad, no. Not home. I need to help Antonio. They're going to kill him right now." "Are you really worried about that?" Her father raised an eyebrow. "I said I would take care of it. Turns out Antonio has some very good friends. My men just had to clean up." "But how is he? Is he okay?" Andrea couldn't calm down. "He's fine." "Really?" "Although rebuilding the farm will be easier said than done." "Dad, Diego is still in the pit," Andrea remembered suddenly. "He's a traitor." "Let's go, I'll show you." "All right then, let's go," her father finally relented. "And we'll swing by the farm. You won't give up on this, will you?" "Never. Not when it comes to you," Andrea declared, throwing herself into his arms. Hugging his broad chest, she cried unabashedly. He stroked her back, speaking words of comfort and tenderness. Right then, he wasn't the almighty oligarch, but simply a father who had been terrified for his daughter, caught up in trouble. Diego was still in the pit when they reached him. They loaded him into the car and sent him off to town. The other two thugs followed in the direction of the farm. Approaching the farm, Andrea's heart squeezed with worry. Indeed, a local war seemed to have taken place here. Fences were broken, windows shattered, and the barn had collapsed. Sheep and goats ran wild in the fields, chased by sturdy men in camouflage. To complete the scene, a helicopter stood on the property with several equally colorful men around it. Torres made a call and hung up. "It's us. Have you taken the last ones? Let them through." Only now did Andrea realize that several rifles had been aimed at them all along. 3 more soldiers emerged from the half-collapsed barn roof, lowering their weapons. Antonio approached them. His injured arm was bandaged and hung in a sling. Spotting Andrea stepping out of the car, he sighed with obvious relief. "You're in one piece? Thank God." Andrea silently approached and hugged him around the neck. The soldiers around them nodded approvingly. Her father coughed. But Andrea didn't care. She was so happy to see the farmer, whom she had once despised, alive and well. Forgive me for everything," she whispered, unable to let go. Antonio gestured with one hand, indicating to Torres that he was in shock himself. "Oh well. We managed. I forgive. What's the matter with you?" "But I don't," Andrea interrupted him, turning to her father. "Dad, I'm staying here to work off my debt, now more than ever." Both her father and Antonio protested. "Oh, come on, the guys will help, we'll rebuild from scratch," Antonio murmured, pleading with Torres. "Andrea, the man has already been through enough. With your help, he might just leave the country," her father tried to joke. "But you're wrong there." Andrea straightened proudly to her full small height. "I'm also a Torres. Didn't you build your business from scratch, right? Now I want to see what I'm worth. I can invest the money I have in my personal account into this business." "Andrea, that's supposed to be for your wedding. You wanted everything to be luxurious, a honeymoon abroad." Her father looked at Andrea as if he didn't recognize her. "If someone loves me with all my quirks, then not for a dowry, but for myself." Andrea stood firm. "Antonio, take me as your partner, okay? It seems I'm feeling an irresistible urge for farming," she declared, then whispered in his ear in a completely different tone, almost pleading, "Please agree. Otherwise these sheep and lambs crying will haunt me for the rest of my life." Torres scrutinized this strange pair with a very attentive gaze, then asked Antonio, "What, do you accept the offer?" "Don't look at me, I'm in shock myself. Although, given recent events, there's a chance she'll pull through. And I'll help." "Yes, we'll all help," echoed the men in camouflage clustered around them. "Don't worry, Antonio, we'll rebuild better than before." Antonio, as if awakening from a reverie, hastened. "Here I am. I even forgot to introduce my friends. My comrades." At the first call, they dropped everything and rushed to the rescue. Let anyone dare say that there is no such thing as brotherhood in arms. That's certainly not us. "Oh, come on, Antonio," the men laughed. "You talk like you were at a rally. You've saved all of us more than once. And we needed a good workout, we've been sitting around too long." "They work different jobs now," Antonio explained. "Some have their own businesses, some are in security, 2 are teachers. But when needed, they grabbed their weapons and remembered their combat skills. And thank you, Bernardo, your men arrived just in time and we quickly handled everything. We called the police, and they took the whole gang away tied up like sausages." "Don't sidetrack the conversation," Torres smiled. "Are you taking my daughter as a business partner? Do I have a choice?" Antonio glanced at Andrea, who shook her head. "Agree. Somehow I feel like this shakeup has done me good," Torres pronounced his verdict. "She never had such aspirations before. Who knows? Maybe she'll get her act together. It's scary to see what a girl can turn into." Andrea flared up, but remained silent. Her father was right. Only now, looking at these rugged men ready to drop everything and rush to a friend's aid, did she realize how trivial her goals and joys had seemed. The old Andrea died in that pit, Andrea told herself. "I'll prove that I can be completely different. Father will be proud of me. Give me a chance to make everything right," she quietly requested. Her father looked at Antonio. He shrugged. "Oh well, I've been thinking for a while how we could arrange everything here. A partner wouldn't hurt. Just don't mess around," he tried to joke, but Andrea was serious as ever. "So, am I staying?" she asked again. Antonio hesitated, then nodded. "I won't be a burden, I promise," Andrea assured him. Torres glanced from one to the other. "Let's go talk in private," he suggested, leading Antonio aside. Alone, Andrea stood unsure of what to do. One of Antonio's friends approached her, the one in camouflage. "Excuse me, but I'm really curious," he began, extending his hand. "I'm Eduardo, Antonio and I served together." "Andrea," she replied. Her hand practically disappeared in the man's massive paw. "And who will you be to Antonio, if I may ask?" "Not to pry, but it's a curious matter. We all know Antonio didn't wait for his army girl, married someone richer with connections. Since then, he hasn't been seen with any women. And suddenly, you. Who will I be?" "I don't know, time will tell," Andrea smiled. "Recently I was his enemy number 1, now I'm applying for a partnership. Who knows what's next?" "I see you're our kind of person." Eduardo approved. "If anything, we'll always help, don't doubt it." "He's lucky to have you," Andrea said. "We're lucky to have him," Eduardo replied seriously. "He was our squad leader, always had our backs. Many of the guys owe him a lot. All right, since we've settled everything here, it's time for us to get going." He walked away. Andrea looked towards where her father and Antonio were talking. She had never been interested before in how her father had lived in his youth, who his friends were. But she had seen a photograph of 2 men in military uniform embracing since childhood. Fate had its ways, fathers were friends, their children almost became enemies through Andrea's foolishness. "Andrea, come here," her father called out to her. "We've agreed, first, we'll restore the farm, then buy the animals, establish connections. You'll have your own income from the farm, since you've decided to invest. I'll take care of everything. Dad, Andrea spoke softly but firmly, I know you're my great and powerful Bernardo Torres. You can handle everything with a snap of your fingers. But I would like to try on my own, to see what I'm capable of. Together with a partner, if he's not against it. Her father's eyebrows shot up as he looked from one to the other. Antonio also looked somewhat puzzled. I didn't quite catch that, her father clarified at last. Are you planning to lift this farm with your own hands? And will you stay here to live? Yeah, that's the idea, Andrea clarified. Yes, I want to do it with my own hands. Or don't you believe I can? Her father just chuckled. All right, if you can't manage it, come back home. You can handle city business, he finally said. So you don't believe in me? Andrea pressed. Her father raised his hands playfully. I believe. Just calm down. You're all in me. Laughter echoed around them approvingly. Well, my affairs aren't waiting for me either. Once more, Andrea's father glanced questioningly at Andrea, gesturing toward the car. She nodded. Got it. Yours is taken. And the all-powerful oligarch Bernardo Torres departed towards the city. Several cars followed him, filled with guys he had sent to assist his best friend's son. Soon after, Antonio's friends also left, a helicopter took off, and they were left alone. Both remained silent, surveying the chaos that had engulfed the farm. Let's start from the very beginning, the girl spoke up. My name is Andrea. I'm Antonio, but you already know that, the farmer replied. Andrea, huh? He asked again. Yes, that's what my mom named me. Dad used to say she dreamed of her daughter having the strong Torres character. She was very gentle, kind, soft. It seems angels find it hard to live on earth, so she passed away early, Andrea spoke quietly. My dad raised me alone too. Similar story, it seems. Except yours is alive, fortunately, and mine was killed. Survived 2 foreign wars without a scratch, but got stabbed trying to break up a drunken brawl back home. That's how it goes, Andrea, he shrugged. Unexpectedly to herself, Andrea moved in close and leaned against his broad chest. Antonio flinched, tensed, then gently embraced her with one arm and stroked her back. Don't push me away, okay? Andrea whispered. I'm completely confused, lost. I thought money solved everything, that I could do anything I wanted. It was like I was avenging my dad for not saving Mom. What was he guilty of? He mourned her deeply. And here I was, so spoiled. I don't want to be like that anymore, I don't. Then be different, since you've decided, Antonio spoke softly to her. Be the person your mom and dad wanted to see. There's still time to make things right. Will you help me? Andrea looked up at him, eyes full of hope. Of course, I'll help. I'll even share my sandwich with you. Antonio chuckled. And you won't lock the fridge, will you? Andrea clarified, smiling. I never did lock it, Antonio smirked. Just don't lie on the bed with your shoes on, it's not very classy. What if I'm not wearing shoes? Andrea looked straight into his eyes. Andrea, what are you saying? Antonio was taken aback. I'm saying I really need this right now, Andrea whispered. To feel alive with you. Just don't push me away. It seems I've fallen for you. You think so, he was also feverish, she could feel it, they stood so close. It's just stress, you'll regret it later. I won't regret it, she held onto him tighter. Antonio, I've never been with anyone before. That can't be. It burst out of him. I'm sorry, he added flatly, realizing his words sounded hurtful. It can. Yes, there were parties, friends, acquaintances. Plenty of opportunities, but I couldn't connect with anyone. I knew they didn't love me, just my father's money and power. Andrea tiptoed and kissed him on the lips. The kiss was long, they couldn't part from each other for a long time. And then Antonio lifted the girl in his arms and carried her into the house, to that same bed. There was no room left for fears, resentments, or pain. There was only something big, pure, and ecstatic shared between them. Later, as they lay side by side, coming to their senses from what must always be between a loving man and woman, Antonio said, "Listen, partner, how do you feel about making our business a family affair?" Andrea froze. The meaning of what she had just heard gradually sank in. "Antonio, was that a proposal?" she asked again. He chuckled. "What else could it be? You got it right. Do you think I'd give you up to someone else now? Not a chance, you're my woman. It seems like Dad handed me over to you for work, not for personal use," Andrea replied. Her heart was beating joyfully, but a hint of mischief surfaced. Or maybe she had just learned to defend herself from the world. It turned out to be for personal use. Antonio didn't take her joke. "So, do you agree?" "Antonio, I agree." "Just say it again, please," Andrea asked, sitting up to look into his eyes. "Oh, you girls," Antonio grumbled. He got up in one swift motion, walked to the cabinet, rummaged in a drawer. Andrea waited, trying to calm her heart. Antonio returned and knelt down, holding something in his palm. "Andrea, will you marry me?" he said very seriously. In his palm lay a ring, simple and very elegant. Andrea examined it as if she had never seen jewelry before. "This was Mom's," Antonio clarified. "Keep it as a keepsake." "So, will you marry me? Did you expect to get away with just that from me?" Andrea laughed. "Of course, I will." Antonio carefully slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. "I thought so," he declared, returning to bed, "from the moment I saw you. I won't believe it for anything." Andrea laughed. "What if it's true?" And Antonio began showering her with kisses, leaving her no desire to argue. A month later, they were married. Antonio's friends and Andrea's family gathered for the wedding. She didn't invite any friends of her own. Did she even have any friends up to that point? That's the question. And though her dress wasn't from a fancy designer, and instead of a honeymoon they continued rebuilding the farm, few could imagine a happier couple. "Well, Andrea, you've convinced me you're a true Torres," said her father, raising a toast to the newlyweds. "You're mistaken, Dad, I'm a Perez now," laughed the happy bride. "But trust me, it's just as good." "Congratulations," shouted her father, and through his shining eyes, it was clear he was proud of his daughter with all his heart, who had managed to surprise even him, the mighty oligarch Bernardo Torres. The newlyweds kissed and